Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. We would like to welcome you all again. Before moving on to the keynote speeches, we would like to introduce you a video. Let's watch the video.
(1752), Benjamin Franklin proves that lightning is electrical. 1878, the first hydroelectric plant opens. 1951, the first nuclear power plant opens. 1997, Toyota begins production of hybrid vehicles. 2009, solar prices start to plummet. 2014, oil prices crash again. Oil companies cut budgets dramatically. Welcome to Day 2 of the 23rd World Energy Congress. This Congress takes place at a unique time for the energy sector, a time of grand transition where the speed of policy and technology innovations will define winners and losers. Today's program will focus on identifying the business opportunities in resources and technologies. Fossil fuels will still account for 50 to 70% of global energy usage by 2060. But the balance and geography of these resources are changing like never before. Unconventional gas resources are increasing and coming from a diversity of places. Coal is undergoing its own revolution with changing markets and new usage patterns. Technology is changing the face of the upstream and downstream oil sector, opening new frontiers. New technologies and advances in efficiency mean that renewables will expand across the globe. With decreased costs of production, wind and solar energy are increasingly recognized as competitive sources and provide wider off-grid potential. Up to 2,000 gigawatts capacity potential for hydropower offers greater flexibility for balancing intermittent renewable energy. Nuclear energy is evolving with new technologies and growth in new and emerging markets. But a more diversified energy mix is not the whole story. More profitable e-storage innovation offers much-needed flexibility to electricity networks and systems. Carbon capture and storage was highlighted in our previous Congress as a critical area to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, yet progress has been slow. Transportation is set to change over the next 45 years, with biofuel and electric vehicles powering up to 15 to 30% of our transportation energy needs. Understanding and improving resilience is one of the ways we can respond to these challenges and opportunities. Infrastructure will need to withstand frequent and severe weather events. Competing demands for water and agriculture will trigger great challenges requiring political leadership. Cyber attacks have already disrupted energy systems. New financial instruments such as cyber insurance can help increase resilience. But financing a long-term, resilient transition requires significant investment. It is estimated that up to half the world's current GDP over the next 20 years could be needed to maintain and replace existing systems, as well as to meet growing energy demand and climate objectives. Will the electricity sector become the world's largest investment opportunity? Exploring these new frontiers, our agenda today includes innovative business models, the new frontier, cyber threat, are we at risk of the lights going out? Financing the grand energy transition. Global dynamics of natural gas and LNG markets. Renewable energy systems, learning from large-scale integration. The commodity price storm, signal of a new normal. These discussions will shape the resources, technologies and resilient systems needed for a sustainable energy future. The World Energy Council has been at the forefront of these debates for 93 years. Now, we invite you to embrace this new frontier at this year's World Energy Congress.
Yes, and now today's daily theme is identifying the business opportunities, resources and technologies, as it's mentioned in the video. And I would like to invite now our keynote speaker, Mr. Amin Nasser, President and CEO of Saudi Aramco from Saudi Arabia. Please welcome, sir. And I would like to invite our moderator, John Defterios, to the stage, please. Welcome, John.
Thank you very much. Good morning. My microphone was already up. I appreciate that. Before we invite Mr. Nasser to take the stage, I was just thinking the best way to contextualize our discussion this morning. And having sat in the Middle East for nearly 6 years, we like to say we sit at the crossroads of East and West because of the airline connectivity and the ability to very easily go south into Africa, east into India and China, and then obviously west into Europe. That's very much how Saudi Aramco looks at its business model. But the reality is, being based in the UAE, I spend at least half of my time covering energy, and there's a giant elephant not only in the room today, but in the world markets leading up to 2018. And the potential valuation of $2 trillion for the IPO, right now set in the range of 5%. If any of you have had a chance to visit the complex in the eastern province of Saudi Arabia, it gives me a flashback, being a Californian, of Standard Oil of California and the landscape and the housing complex there. But it's a Saudi institution through and through. In fact, it's production management, and in particular, its reservoir management is the envy of the world, with production prices at $2 to $6 a barrel. We're going to get a chance to talk about his IPO strategy, but very importantly, his investment strategy going forward for the next 10 years. But first, let's give him the stage to give his keynote address from the podium, and a warm welcome again to Amin Nasser.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, Your Excellency, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. Let me first thank the World Energy Council for the opportunity to participate in this session. It's a global event, and I'm really glad to be here. It's also a privilege to be with you all here today, and I'm glad that I'm also delighted that I'm sharing the session this morning with my colleague and good friend, Bob Dudley. I must say that Istanbul is an inspired choice of location for this Congress, famous as the city where East and West meet. It is a perfect place to gather the full strength of the energy industry and discuss the frontiers we must all embrace to deliver a secure, equitable, and sustainable energy future. This morning, I would like to share Saudi Aramco's perspective on our industry's future using 3 broad periods of time. Let me start with the environment we face today, which has never been more challenging and more dynamic. As we all know, a lot has happened in the global oil market since our last Congress in Korea 3 years ago. Back then, Brent crude was trading at $110 per barrel compared to today, which is around half of that. And only earlier this year, it was trading at a quarter of that. The oil and gas industry has been shaken by collapsed earnings, job losses, and business shutdowns. In fact, if the market weakness continues, we expect that around $1 trillion in marginal resources development may be delayed or canceled by the end of this decade. And potentially, there is an even graver consequence. Just as the resilient global oil production we have been seeing over the past couple of years is underpinned by a decade of healthy investment, I am concerned that the capital deferral we are currently witnessing will have the opposite effect over the next decade. If they do, I fear that global oil supply growth will fall behind demand over time. That would have a major impact on both oil prices and the global economy. Having said that, we have noticed recently that the market started to recover, and we hope that it will continue to do that for the foreseeable future. At Saudi Aramco, our response has always been to take a long-term and flexible approach. We have continued to invest prudently in our core oil and gas project and in the downstream and chemicals. Where we have deferred and stretched projects, these have mostly been in discretionary and support investments. And we are continuing to maintain our spare production capacity to help respond to unforeseen events and help minimize their potential impact on the global economy. By doing so, we are playing our part in enhancing the energy security of global consumers like Turkey here. Looking next at the transition period, as the world moves towards alternatives, the facts are clear. The world's primary energy demand today is about 280 million barrels of oil equivalent. Roughly 80% of it is supplied by fossil fuel, and almost 1/3 is met by oil. By 2040, the world's primary energy will rise from 280 million barrels of oil equivalent to 360 million. Yet, it is anticipated that 75% of that will still come from fossil fuel. What is more, although the share of fossil fuels in the global energy mix decreases, their demand in absolute terms will grow, rising from 230 million barrels of oil equivalent to 270 million barrels by 2040. And for oil specifically, it is expected to rise from over 94 million barrels per day currently to about 104 million barrels by 2040. So the role of oil and gas in the global energy mix seems likely to remain significant for decades to come. Yet business as usual cannot be our future model. Low oil prices do not change the fact that the current oil and gas resources, as well as new discoveries, are more challenging and more expensive to develop. Equally, today's oil and gas fields are becoming increasingly mature and complex to operate. And although alternatives and renewables face hurdles, their role will steadily grow as the world moves towards a new energy era driven by the Paris Agreement and climate change. Ladies and gentlemen, let me be clear. Navigating the transition period will require a new roadmap, a real and holistic Energy 2.0, if you will. And the whole of our industry will need to develop and embrace this new business model. Clearly, Energy 2.0 will encompass a wide range of issues, but I want to concentrate on three important and closely related components this morning. First, we must continue making adequate and timely investment in the supply of oil and gas. That sounds like more of the same, but I am concerned that this long-term investment might not be made thanks to the combined effect of price uncertainty, environmental, regulatory, and social pressures. However, at Saudi Aramco, our investment continues to be driven by our long-term focus. We plan to invest more than $300 billion over the coming decade to reinforce our preeminent position in oil, maintain our spare production capacity, pursue a large exploration and production program centering on conventional and unconventional gas resources. Second, the current environment has demonstrated that strong financial capacity is an essential component of greater resilience. Without it, our industry will not be able to get past soft patches like the current downturn and make those long-term investments. Another essential component of Energy 2.0 will be dramatically altering our underlying cost structure. Even at Saudi Aramco, where we enjoy the benefits of prolific oil and gas fields and production costs that are among the lowest in the industry. Greater efficiency and cost competitiveness without compromising on safety or the environment is mission critical for everyone, and it needs bold ideas. So to create Energy 2.0, incremental improvement will not be enough. We will have to make transformational improvements. The current market situation has also demonstrated that integration can strengthen portfolio resilience for companies whose situation favor downstream, and especially those who excel at it. That is why we have grown our global refining capacity at Saudi Aramco to over 5 million barrels of refining capacity, and we plan to grow that further to 8 to 10 million barrels over the next decade. Similarly, our share of chemical production capacity across our global operation will grow from 12 million metric ton per year to over 34 million ton over the same period. Third, we must make sufficient investment in innovation and technology to make the use of oil ultra-clean, as well as overcome the challenges faced by alternatives. At Saudi Aramco, our goal is to become a world leader in cutting-edge energy, chemical, and clean fuel technology that boost efficiency, reduce cost, and minimize emissions. So we are leveraging global talent and expertise through our 11 research and technology offices over 3 continents, with full coordination from our lead R&D center at our headquarters in Bahrain. We are also making use of strategic alliances and venture capital, including Saudi Aramco Energy Venture, which invests in high-end startup technology companies that are working in some of the world's most difficult but exciting energy challenges. And technological advances will help us to increase the aggregate recovery factor from our major producing fields to 70% and increase our oil resources by 100 billion barrels to 900 billion barrels by 2030. We are already making real progress. For example, we are focused on solutions across the entire spectrum of carbon issues. Our work ranges from collaborative research with auto manufacturers on integrated engine fuel systems of the future and carbon capture and storage, to our pioneering work on turning CO2 into sustainable polymers and chemicals. When it comes to shaping the future energy landscape in a greenhouse gas-constrained world, our approach must be industry-led, technology-driven, and commercially viable. So that is Energy 2.0 roadmap for the transitional period. What about energy over the long term? To economically introduce alternative energy sources at scale, I believe we must focus on 3 critical areas. First, technology investment are required to overcome the existing technical and economic hurdles facing alternatives in general and renewables in particular, leading to groundbreaking enhancements. Second, we need to see a prudent deployment of alternatives where they gradually but steadily assume a greater share of the energy burden without causing disruptions and economic hardship. Third, and just as important as the other 2, will be our response to the growing fragmentation, nationalism, and rising tide of anti-globalization sentiment around the world. In light of all of this uncertainty and potential economic impact, retaining the insurance of proven energy sources until the contours and substance of alternative energy future are assured is surely the smart play. For us at Saudi Aramco, the strategy is a powerful mixture of increased energy efficiency, more gas, ultra-clean oil fuels, advanced technologies, and certainly renewables. On top of this, Saudi Aramco is also playing its part in the kingdom's own long-term strategy. The newly launched Vision 2030 was discussed yesterday by our Minister of Energy, Industry and Mineral Resources and the Chairman of Saudi Aramco in his keynote speech. A key aim of the vision is to diversify the kingdom's economy into suitable industrial sectors and services. That includes stronger commercial ties with partner countries like Turkey, and Saudi Aramco is already looking at some downstream opportunities here. Likewise, it is a great opportunity for Turkish companies to bring their expertise and invest in the kingdom's future. Later today, we plan to sign 18 memorandum of understanding with 18 Turkish construction companies that will be coming to the kingdom, as we have a lot of growth in the kingdom. And that will hopefully boost the bilateral and business relation further. In addition, the vision places special emphasis on localization. For Saudi Aramco, that means doubling the percentage of locally produced energy-related goods and services to 70% by 2021, boosting employment for talented young Saudis and driving export growth. Finally, the vision is clear about the power of partnership, and so are we. For example, it is why we are founding member of the Oil and Gas Climate Initiative, OGCI, with 9 industrial peers and chaired by my colleague here, Bob Dudley, who account for more than 20% of the global oil and gas production. We issued a joint declaration before COP21 in Paris, which not only set out the significant achievement already made by our industry on the issue, but how we will catalyze practical action on climate change going forward. And we were proud to sign it. Ladies and gentlemen, I hope my remarks illustrate the new frontiers we must all embrace in this challenging environment, and how Saudi Aramco is not only pursuing them, it is constantly redefining them and the opportunities that they bring us all. We know the final destination, which is alternative energy, but adequate supply of reliable energy sources like oil and gas will need to be made available in the interim, while making them as clean as possible. That is the toughest journey our industry has ever undertaken, and it will take time. We must also accept that business as usual cannot be our future model. It is a critical first step in the transformation our industry needs. But with the pioneering qualities our industry is famous for, I truly believe we can make that bold yet smart move and deliver the secure, equitable, and sustainable energy future the world needs. Thank you.
Excellent, as always. I don't think I would expect any differently. Please.
Thank you.
I know I have about 5 or 6 minutes with you, so I'm going to ask you to keep your answers pretty tight, and I'll keep my questions very limited. Is that a deal?
Yes. Thank you.
I don't want you to be late for your MOU signing, and I don't want to get in trouble here. You brought up a very interesting point. You mentioned, and I've seen the surveys of spending on development for oil and gas being cut by up to $1 trillion between 2015 and 2020. I saw that Wood Mackenzie study. But Saudi Aramco is doing the opposite. Give us a snapshot over the next 10 years of your level of investment, and particularly when it comes to the domestic investment into the kingdom in the energy space.
And as I highlighted in my remarks, we are planning to spend close to $300 billion over the next 10 years. Our focus will be on gas. Most of that will be going to grow our gas resources and production. Just from 2000 to 2015, we almost doubled our gas production from 6 billion to 12 billion standard cubic feet per day, and we plan over the next decade to double that. That will avail more crude to our utility sector and to our industry within the kingdom, and at the same time will reduce the liquid burning that is currently utilized in the utility sector and avail it for export over the long term. So a lot of emphasis will be on growing our gas and petrochemical industry within the kingdom, as well as globally, of course.
Saudi Aramco fits into the 2030 transformation strategy. Is there a danger there's too much of a burden on the flagship company of the country to do too much in a short span of time?
I think Aramco did a lot in the past and will continue to do more in the future. And I think what is required from Aramco is, I think it is part of what we had in our plans and our strategy in Aramco to build our different sectors. And I think Vision 2030 talks about localization, creating jobs, creating more opportunities for the private sectors. And I think Aramco need to play and will play a major role on achieving the Vision 2030.
Now, as a state-run company, the financials are considered a black box because they hadn't needed to be opened up to the outside world. Are you realistically ready for the level of transparency that an IPO will require, or is it not a big stretch for you?
It's for us. We have a very good governance model, and we will be more than happy to share our financial with the investors when we go public. We have been sharing all of our data with our shareholder before, and it will make us a lot more proud to share that data with the investor in the future, because as I mentioned, in terms of our performance in recovery, in discovery, in cost, in environment, in safety, in localization, in creating more local contents and opportunities, and in technology. I mentioned 11 technology centers globally. So a lot of great data that we'll be more than happy to share.
What's the magic between 5%? Not too small, but not too big for the market to absorb? Why the 5% stake?
I think the 5% was mentioned by His Royal Highness Prince Mohammed, the Chairman of the Supreme Council of Saudi Aramco, and by our Chairman, His Excellency Khalid Al-Falih. I think nothing magical, but the size of Aramco, if you talk about the biggest listing that happened before, which is, I think it was Alibaba, if I'm not mistaken, and it was like $25 billion. So if you talk about Saudi Aramco and 5%, this is too big. You're talking about a big number in terms of, depending on the size of valuation of Saudi Aramco, but I can assure you it's going to be much, much more than that.
But you've landed on 5%, is what you're saying?
We are not. This is a decision that will be left to the Supreme Council, the shareholder, the Saudi Aramco Supreme Council. They will be deciding on what percentage. But His Royal Highness mentioned 5% or less at a certain point. But that will be left, the decision on that will be left to the Supreme Council.
I did the math. You're 4 times the size of Exxon, BP, and Total of France combined. Is it justified at that sort of level if you go with the 5% that you're suggesting here?
As I said, when you say 5% of Aramco, of the whole Aramco, that will be a big listing, one of the biggest in the world, and I don't think there will be a listing that size ever in the future. But hopefully, with enough liquidity in different stock markets, and it will be accommodated.
You haven't missed the window then, 2018. This is the worst environment for IPOs, as you know, in 20 years. By 2018, the price will be different and the conditions for IPOs will be in your favor?
We are optimistic. You've seen, I highlighted in my remarks that the market started to recover. We expect it to recover even more in 2017. And I think the time in 2018 will be almost right.
Final IPO question. You've declared an Asian listing, obviously Riyadh, the capital of the kingdom, potentially London and New York. After the JASTA veto of President Obama, would you think about not going to New York as not being a user-friendly investment destination to the kingdom?
We did not finalize yet our listing destination, where we are going to list exactly. We are reviewing, until now, all markets. We are reviewing New York, London, Hong Kong, Japan Stock Exchange. We are reviewing all markets. Nothing off the table as of yet.
Nothing on the table even for political reasons?
Off the table.
Yeah, no, nothing off the table for political reasons is what I'm saying.
Yet. So all markets will be included. It is ultimately up to the Supreme Council and the Board of Saudi Aramco to decide where to list and which market will offer us the biggest opportunity for listing.
You seem very calm about the process. It's a big undertaking, but it's all under control is what you're suggesting?
No, we have been Aramco system is built around an international oil company. So it is not difficult for us for that transition. And we have been working on it for some time. So when we talk about 2018, we feel comfortable that we will be able to meet all the requirements in different markets if we decide to go to certain markets.
Good. I promised you'd be done by 9:45, and I think I kept my deadline. Yeah. Have a good signing. It's always a pleasure. Nice round of applause for Amin Nasser again, the CEO of Saudi Aramco.
Can I go?
You can go.
I appreciate it.
The handcuffs are off. Good to see you. Thanks
Thank
again.
You. Thank you. I need to shake hands with Bob.
I think I can do it if you want. You'd say thanks very much. Our next keynote address is going to be given by the man who just stood out of his chair so he doesn't have to sit back down again. I often say that he probably had the toughest job in the world when he took over the reins as CEO of British Petroleum. Not only did he have to deal with the Deepwater Horizon case, which was better than $60 billion in settlements, that crashed right into one of the worst corrections we've seen in oil prices for the last 2 decades, taking us down to $27 a barrel. In fact, in a recent interview that we had last year, he was saying we could be facing a climate of lower for longer. And how does he protect the BP going forward, close the chapter on Deepwater Horizon, and then look to the new projects that are coming on stream? A nice warm welcome to Bob Dudley, the Chief Executive Officer of BP.
Thank you, John. Thank you very much.
Thanks. We'll take the podium.
Okay, great. Well, thank you very much, John, and good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here in one of our industry's truly great global occasions. My thanks to the World Energy Council. You picked a standout venture this year. This is one of the world's most historic cities, and that's as true in energy terms as it could be in any other way you'd mention it. Istanbul has been the meeting place between East and West for centuries, and that tradition is going from strength to strength when it comes to energy. In BP, we passed a milestone of our own a few years ago, a century of business here in Turkey. We've seen some changes in the global energy market in that time. Our industry has had its highs and lows over the years and continues to do so. But the sweep and the clock speed, as Amin said, of change have taken on a different pace in the 21st century. Our world has become much more competitive with abundant supply, now keeping the prices low. At the same time, we're more aware than ever of the impacts from climate change and the need to reduce carbon emissions, both of which mean that businesses are faced with very hard decisions, and the choices they make will determine whether they succeed or fail. So in my remarks today, I'd like to look at 3 challenges, if I may. I'll call them 3 C's: the challenge of competitiveness, the challenge of carbon, and the challenge of choice. And in doing so, I'd like to highlight the vital strategic role that Turkey is playing in the world of energy as well. Let me start with the competitiveness challenge and the fundamentals of supply and demand. As we're all aware, right now, we're going through a time where supply has outstripped demand. Technology has continued to unlock new sources of supply, notably shale oil and gas in the United States. And at the same time, global energy demand has slowed in growth from the extraordinary pace of the past 20 years. As a result, energy is abundant. Prices have come down, and the pressure is on to become more competitive at lower prices. These are profound changes, and they mean we need to be competitive in a way that's very different from the past. In previous cycles, as an industry, we've let our costs drift up when prices are high, then cut back when prices fall. From now on, the challenge is to build and sustain businesses that are good through all the cycles. You would have thought we would have learned our lesson already. We can't lose our discipline on costs at any time or let capital expenditure slide out of control. There are a number of ways we can prevent that from happening. The first is through a constant focus on simplification, cost-cutting, waste, improving efficiency, and driving up reliability. Safety is really important here as well. It's a result of disciplined, rigorous, systematic working, and that approach also leads other benefits. In BP, we've seen our numbers on efficiency and reliability go up at the same time that safety has improved. And of course, they go hand in hand. The second is being innovative with our business models. We need to be open about new ways of doing business, really doing things differently. At least for us, one recent example in BP is the deal we've done with Det Norsk in Norway, where we've combined the strengths of both companies in a new business called Aker BP. It will bring together Det Norsk's streamlined operating model and our technical skills, international experience, and knowledge of the Norwegian offshore sector built up over decades. The third step is to take advantage of the latest revolution in technology. The digital revolution is being described as the next industrial revolution, and you can see why. Things that used to take months, like the analysis of seismic data, are taking hours as a result of supercomputing. That means we can find answers to problems in seconds with a huge impact on productivity. Virtual reality is also taking performance up another level. We've trained crews on shore in the latest state-of-the-art simulators, leading to teams drilling wells 40% of schedule and 40% under budget in one project recently, and all drilled to the usual rigorous safety standards. The fourth competitive step is in an area where you could say that we need to be less innovative rather than more. And I'm talking about standardization, making the most of what's already proven to work well in as many places as possible. Standardization has huge potential to lower costs, and that applies to individual companies as well as procurement and even whole projects. And fifth, let's not forget about the human side of things. Relationships are more important than ever. We need to respect on all sides when negotiating costs down across the supply chain in a way that is sustainable for everyone. And in terms of relationships with governments, it's a time to work together to ensure that investments continue to flow. That requires mutual trust, flexibility, and contractual arrangements that share risks and rewards equitably. I think in the world of energy, we're in the world of relationships as much as transactions. Let me turn to the second challenge now, which is the carbon challenge. Energy is only one of the many important sectors for climate change and the climate challenge. But as energy companies, we have a major part to play in the transition to lower carbon energy and the lower carbon economy. We have a responsibility to provide more energy, as Amin said, because global demand is growing. We think the most likely path says demand will be about a third bigger than today by 2035. Think about that. And yet at the same time, we need to be reducing emissions of greenhouse gases. Momentum for action has been growing for some time. The agreement reached in Paris at the UN Climate Conference could be an important and is an important milestone. We welcome the agreement at BP. We're playing our part, and we encourage governments to play their part by putting a price on carbon and encouraging lower carbon solutions. In BP, we've actually been a part of the momentum for some time, and we have been generally recognized, I think, as one of the first major oil and gas companies to publicly acknowledge the need for action on climate change back in the late 1990s. For more than 15 years, we've supported the Carbon Mitigation Initiative at Princeton University in the US, which has worked hard in research into the science of climate change and potential policy solutions. If you get some time, look into that Princeton study. It's public. And we've invested a substantial amount in low-carbon businesses. Not everything has worked commercially, but you always gain something from experience, and today we have two significant renewable businesses that have come out of the side of that phase of investment. One is wind in the United States, and the other is biofuels in Brazil. Together, they add up to one of the largest operated interests in renewables among the oil and gas companies. We also have interest in a wide range of clean tech startups through our venturing activities. And we're also a member of the Oil and Gas Climate Initiative, or OGCI, which is a collaboration of 10 major oil and gas companies, including my friend Amin's company, Saudi Aramco. We intend to lead on the development of lower carbon actions. One example of such collaboration is looking at the potential of carbon capture, use, and storage. The shorthand that you'll hear of is CCUS. We know CCUS has the potential to play a major role in the future as part of the solution to meeting higher energy demand with lower emissions, and will essentially be essential in a tightly carbon-constrained world. And across the industry, a number of pilot projects are underway, including those where CO2 is used to enhance oil recovery. However, we're still a long way from a world in which the potential of CCUS is being used to realize in activities, but we want to do something about that in the OGCI, and it will be a major focus of activity for the group. Also, reducing methane emissions or methane emissions is another area of interest. By sharing best practices and technological advances that reduces the emissions, we can bring down total emissions much faster. Methane is a potent greenhouse gas. We look forward to sharing more details on all of our activities very soon. So, John, just to recap, we have two challenges ahead of us, carbon and competitiveness, and they lead to the third challenge of choice. Drop things sometimes at BP.
No broken bottle, though. That's a good sign.
So responding to these challenges means making some very tough choices to be resilient, low prices, resilient to low carbon. If you're here tomorrow, Tufan Erginbilgic, who's BP's downstream chief executive, he's from Turkey. We'll be talking about some choices we're making on this side of the business as well. New fuels, lubricants with a better economy, our new petrochemicals technology that is lowering the carbon footprint of thousands and thousands of everyday items. He has a really long list, and we're only just getting started. And on the upstream side of the business, we have to make choices in our portfolio about investments and divestments. Part of the competitive challenge is that we cannot do everything. We need to keep investing for growth, and that means making big choices to sanction big projects. You have to do it very carefully. In BP, our recent investment decisions have included an expansion of our Tangguh LNG plant in Indonesia, the massive Kazan tight oil project in Oman, the natural gas projects in Egypt and Trinidad, and the Shah Deniz 2 project in Azerbaijan, which will produce gas for some 3,500 kilometers of the Southern Gas Corridor pipeline system passing right through Turkey. All those projects have one thing in common, and they're all natural gas projects. And this is one very important shift I'd like to emphasize. While renewables are growing faster than any other fuel, and are going to be increasingly important in this part of the mix, it will take time to grow from a base of around 3% of the energy mix today in the world. Even if renewables were to grow faster than any fuel has done in history, they are unlikely to contribute more than 15% of the total energy mix by 2035. That is why there has to be an increasing role for natural gas as a substitute for coal. That will allow us to limit carbon quickly and at scale, while meeting the energy needs of developing countries. Oil has a continuing role as a transport fuel for its huge advantages. Its high density. That small molecule of energy, of liquid energy, is incredible, along with its affordability. And industry will continue to make great leaps forward in engine and fuel efficiency. Cleaner fuels, as Amin said. We've all heard of big oil, but this is now the age of big gas as well. Big gas ticks all the boxes. It's competitive, it's lower carbon, In BP, we're already around 50% of our portfolio's natural gas now and heading towards 60% by the end of the decade as new projects come on stream. And Turkey is surrounded by natural gas. It has supplies from the north to the east and the south, and it is one of the world's largest and biggest energy markets in Europe and to the west. In BP, we're very proud of our investment and our involvement in the Trans-Anatolian Pipeline, or TANAP as it's called. It's being constructed from one end of Turkey to the other. It'll be transporting 16 billion cubic meters of gas on its way to consumers here in Turkey and in Europe. And this will further increase Turkey's strategic importance as a corridor for gas, as well as a corridor for oil. Its strategic importance is evidenced by the agreement that we've all read about, the Turk Stream project, with gas coming in from Russia as well. And we're also very pleased to work with many other activities here in Turkey on our relationships and network of over 700 retail stations into the Baku-Tbilisi-Ceyhan pipeline that moves about 750,000 barrels of oil today, which essentially has removed 750,000 barrels of oil passing through the beautiful Bosphorus. So in conclusion, those are the 3 C's that sum up the challenges for today's industry: competitive, carbon, and choice. And there's 2 different ways to look at these challenges. And one is to carry on doing what we've always done and hope things turn out well. The other is to see the opportunities and to look for ways to make the most of them by doing something new. As an industry, we have a history of doing the latter. It's certainly been our way. We started out over a century ago in the Middle East. We pioneered exploration and production in Alaska and the North Sea. We developed a very effective trading business, and we're one of the first to invest heavily in alternative energy. More recently, as John said, we have focused on earning back trust after the tragic Deepwater Horizon accident in 2010. It has taken $61 billion to meet our obligations in the aftermath of the accident. We've had to restore trust day by day by delivering safe and reliable operations, and looking more widely, there's a long-standing issue of trust in the oil and gas industry. We're certainly not alone in that. Trust is in short supply in the world, I think. There's a lack of trust across society, in corporations, but also in governments, big institutions, such as the EU and the UN, even the sporting bodies. But our industry has a real image problem, in some countries at least, and has done for some time. That can make a tough job more difficult. The world is going to need energy from all sources, and oil and gas will be required to provide much of that energy for decades to come. Over 1 billion people around the world still don't have access to electricity. And that's in parts of the world where the population is growing very strongly. Our industry has a key role in providing the heat, the light, and the mobility around the world, and in lifting people out of poverty. And we will continue to do so. So in order to tackle those 3 challenges and win back trust, we need to do 3 things as an industry, and very briefly, John. Let's do a better job of delivering and talking about the prosperity we have brought to countries, about the community development projects we undertake, about the work we're leading to address emissions, and about our commitment to the transition to a low-carbon economy. Let's continue to build relationships and partnerships that enable countries to grow and prosper while limiting their carbon emissions. Let's adapt our business models to succeed in this new and changing environment. Let's harness technology and innovation. And let's tell our story more effectively to make sure that the best young talent around the world gets excited by the work and opportunities ahead in our industry. Above all, we should be confident. I think we should be proud of the service we deliver to the world, not to apologize. We should get excited about the great transition that is underway. And we should be optimistic about the essential role that our industry is going to play in that. Thank you very much. John?
Thanks. That was very comprehensive.
It'd be too long.
No, it's excellent, excellent. I wanted to pick up, because one of the things that you didn't cover here are kind of the dynamics around the market for pricing, and get into detail about some of the new projects which you've been focusing on to close the chapter on the recent past with Deepwater Horizon, then look to the new projects. But let's start with the pricing environment. 53, 54 in this range is not 27 that we saw in January today, but it's 100% gain. Is there a trap here, though, if the OPEC producers cut back, we see some of the non-OPEC producers freeze production, and the price rises, that we see some of those cost-efficient producers, including BP, come back in and boost production, and that puts a cap on pricing? Is this a trap that could play out in 2017 where it limits the upside potential for pricing?
Well, I think stable prices and smoothing of oil and gas prices is good for the world. So I don't see it as a trap, really, but I do see the price of oil setting itself a band. You do have the shale oils in the U.S., I think, which can't turn it on and off, which some people say you just turn it on and off. I think it will attenuate the pricing a bit. The key to it is demand is growing. It's growing in China, it's growing in Europe, it's growing in North America. But as you said earlier, as much as $1 trillion of big projects have been canceled or deferred around the world, and this could catch up with the world. So rather than thinking about the prices, I think we always need to focus on the supply and demand. Fatih Birol said that yesterday. Right now, they're pretty much in balance. So projects coming on around the same rate as demand growth is probably going to lead to a stable oil price. And my prediction, I think it will cycle between 55 and 70 going forward for the rest of the decade, unless we do get caught in a supply squeeze or geopolitical upheaval of some kind.
There's a lot of motion built into the market. You had President Putin here at the Energy Congress saying we agree to a freeze at record levels, and voila, we see a spike. Is the market getting ahead of realities? Is this the danger?
I think what we've seen in the last few days, and really the last few months, are countries who have not tended to communicate and reach understandings between them, and we've seen that, countries that haven't, including inside of OPEC. So the fact that countries are talking together and reaching some understanding. I think the details are less important now, other than the fact you can just see people working together. And I think they realize it's not good for the world to have prices at 25. It's not good at 100. So I think they are also trying to find that balance point.
2017 is a big year. You have 9 projects representing the equivalent of 500,000 barrels a day of new capacity, and moving to 800,000 barrels of new capacity by 2020. Can you turn that reputational damage from Deepwater Horizon around with this new focus on new capacity?
I think it's going to take a long time for us and our reputation in the United States. I think our reputation around the world has generally been supportive of what we've done. I think we stepped up, we met our obligations, sold a good third of the company to meet those obligations. $61 billion is the wealth of nations. And I think in many places, as long as we can operate safely, operate reliably, that also generates safe and reliable operating cash flows. We need to rebuild the confidence of shareholders as well, and I think we're on that track. We're never going to get approach our business with any kind of hubris alone. But next year is the largest year in the history of BP for commissioning new projects in its history.
You have one of the toughest jobs, I had said, coming in after that disaster and then facing an oil price crisis. There's now a movie about Deepwater Horizon with Mark Wahlberg and Kate Hudson starting. How do you maintain internally a focus on the future in this sort of environment still, would you suggest, as a leader?
I think after the accident, it shook the company to the core. Absolutely. We restructured how we do things. We centralized things more, set standards. Got a great team of people who have been through a lot. Not everybody is still with it, but I got a great management team that everybody's rowing in the same direction. People are very proud of what the company's done, and they know it's really hard. And they see the movie, and they're a little bit saddened by it because it paints out a typical villain versus heroes. And of course, the reality of real life is very, very different. That's an entertainment movie, but I think people realize it for what it is. But I think it's a very, very loyal, hardworking team that just wants to bring the company back to its former self without ever, but remaining very humble about it.
I want to look at a couple of geopolitical issues. One of them is you placed your first order in Iran recently for a substantial shipment of oil and gas products here. Do you see yourself in the conditions of the international petroleum contract that's there in Iran being a player and going back to the original roots of BP?
Our original roots did start there well over 100 years ago. To be honest, I don't know. I don't know the details of the contract yet. We're going to have to be very careful. We don't want to violate any sanctions, like everyone's very, very cautious about it. It's a large oil and gas province. We have signed an agreement to trade crude oil. I think that's a good step to learn how to work with Iran. But we don't have any specific plans right now.
Good. It holds a great deal of promise, and they want to entice companies like BP. It's almost a market you can't be outside of. Should the U.S. think differently about engaging with this present administration to give them an opportunity to develop a middle class? It's a key strategic position and question beyond just an oil company, of course.
Well, I think for oil companies right now in general, we're all short of capital. We have to use it extremely carefully, our investments. So they need to be very, very competitive before oil companies will, I think, step in and invest. You can't just invest in a country because it's a country. So I think that's probably one of the biggest challenges for the oil sector. And I think there are confusing signals about the sanctions, quite honestly, from outside governments. So that puts another lens on it for decision making for everybody, I think.
Final point, are you surprised, and you have interest both in Russia and Turkey? We had phenomenal tensions 4 months ago between the two countries, and then here in Istanbul, a reboot, both with interest with a new pipeline, but also geostrategically when it comes to Syria as well. Things can change on a dime.
I think one of the things that energy does is it brings people and countries together. I am greatly relieved that the tension levels have dropped. I think it's a great thing to put another highway of energy into Europe, natural gas. And of course, Turkey itself is a growing economy, but I am very pleased to see that for the state of the world. I do think that trade builds bridges between countries. I think it's really important, and I'm glad to see as many of those set up around the world between any country as possible, just as somebody who lives in the world.
Good. It's always a pleasure to see you. Thanks a lot, John, for the comprehensive speech and the very fair answers in the exchange here. Bob Dudley, once again, the Chief Executive Officer of BP.
Thank you, John.
Thanks again.
Okay, see you.
We have a roundtable coming up. We're just going to take a 3-minute break to expand our seating here. And then our kind Master of Ceremonies, Buchek, is going to come back up and introduce the panel. We'll just take a 3-minute break to set up the chairs. Thanks.
Thank you very much, John, for moderating the session.
Since we defined the essence of our work as serving the people 20 years ago, we've been striving for a better energy future. This is the reason why we call ourselves Energy.